let's just quickly review what we've done. So we built this thing called timeline activity, right? And it looks... Oh, what happened to my emulator? Weird. It looks like that emulator that we have. It just blew up. Didn't break. So we'll see it in a second. But basically what we did is we subclassed. In onCreate we got a cursor, we got the adapter, and then we set that adapter to that I don't even need this to that list, right? So essentially, if you look at this design, we basically, this was our cursor, this was our list activity. Initially it was a list view, now it's a list activity, and this was our adapter that was basically providing for the glue between the two. So far so good. So that's what we did before the break. And the way we implemented that was this. Then the one problem that we had was the mapping of a particular column. In this case, it was the created that. We wanted to inject some business logic. So we wanted to come here and have it say 10 minutes ago, half an hour ago, that sort of thing. So that's why we went and bothered creating this view binder. Normally you wouldn't have to have that, but that's why I picked certain methods that I knew would kind of point out to this shortcoming so that we get to implement it. It's a motivation for it, right? So that was our view binder. And then finally I moved the menu system from the other menu to this one. So right now I have this looks like that's if I run the app. That's my app. So that tells you who posted what, right? And if I want to go to the next menu, I can go preferences, okay, and I can update the preferences, right? And the one that we don't have is the way to get to the status update. So now that I changed what the menu is, probably timeline should really not be timeline but be status update, right? So I'm just gonna do that quick change. So we don't. So in the menu, I now need a way to go to the timeline update. So actually, I'm gonna edit this one, so as opposed to timeline, it's gonna be status item. Status update. I'll just call it status. Status update is better. And then for the text, I think we already have a piece of text that says status. Maybe not. Oops, I wanted to say status update. That's fine. I had one. There, status update. Click on save, and then in my not in my timeline activity, but in my this one, I'm gonna say dot item status update, and then we're gonna launch status activity. That's it. Right, and at this point I may, even my status activity, I may actually take out some of the style stuff just to leave it to be as straightforward as possible. I'll maybe even take out this and just leave a button on this. What if I wanted to convert this one to be a relative? This is fine. Since we're going for a hollow theme. There's the theme hollow, that's what it looks like. That's fine. I'll just leave it like that. So just a couple of minor changes to make everything look pretty and presentable. So there's my UI. Oops. Oh, by the way, there's a holiday party at in the building. Next break. Downstairs lobby. So so this is this. If I go menu, there's status update. Gives me my status update. I can say hello from Hola. Oh, there's a problem with this. I may change some of the skins or just remove them. And another thing that'd be nice is this menu. We may want to rearrange it. So for example, status update may be the first thing that I want to do. Right? Preferences may be the second thing I want to do. And refresh maybe the third thing I want to do, right? So you can kind of like rearrange these buttons. For instance, or like this, status, refresh, prefs. Whatever works for you. And I think I was going to change some of the colors in my style because I no longer like them. That's fine. Padding great. Bam, bam, bam. I think the problem was the manifest file. Do I have a theme somewhere else? We don't have a theme anywhere, right? Or style. Okay, so I'm gonna leave that as is, but I think something is still using the theme. My status. I'll just remove that. Oh yeah. Cool. So this would be like your standard looking Android 12, 11 on app, right? So data, menu, status update, menu, status update. Huh. Is that not working? Why is my status update not clicking? That's an interesting question. So status update is going to launch this activity, right? Menu, when you click on status update, that's the key, status update. And I wonder if it has to do with this private. No, those for preferences. So preferences label is gonna be prefs. Preferences. Okay. So why is it not launching? Try again. Menu. There we go. I just need to reboot. So see, now I have this UI that looks more like standard ice cream sandwich. Hello from Paula. Cool. Click back, right? And now here it says Yamba, and if I go into preferences, it says preferences, right? And if I go into status update, it says status update. So it's pretty kind of neat, right? UI. You guys happy? Cool. So a couple of what are the problems that we have going on right now? Let me close everything. One of the problems is this. If I go back to preferences, to menu. Okay, let me take a look at the timeline, public timeline. Hello from Holo. So this was there, right? Okay, it's not here, right? Right. So the last one we saw was this message. That message is there, right? So now if I go, fine, I can go menu, refresh. Nothing happens. Why? Yeah, so it has, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, we did this. What did we do the actual updating of the data? What did we do getting the data? Right. So so if I look at the timeline activity, which method did we do that? Where did we get the data from the database? OnCreate, right? And so how often does OnCreate get called? Okay. So so how would we do this if we wanted to notify it? Yeah, we could do that. We could basically have one part of the system tell us if there's something new, right? So for example, one approach would be that we could have this design, right? So this guy knows that there's something new. It could notify us and say, hey, there's something new, do something about that. Right? Make sense? So this is now back to broadcast receivers in a way, but it's in a different case, different usage. Right? Because we have to now use this broadcast receiver within the timeline activity. So we could subscribe it and say, hey, when there's something new, refreshes. Make sense? Yeah.
Why can't we share some state and have a callback?
Who's going to call back? How do you call back?
Or we can create a shared object which we get from the application and it's shared between the update service and the activity.
Okay.
And we can have a callback also.
Okay, so that shared object would call
Something that is implemented in activity.
Okay, so I have a shared object, but how do I have that shared object do work? Right? I mean, how do you do it in Java? You would need to register yourself, so the activity would need to register itself with a callback, with a caller, and something else would. Yeah, I mean, presumably there's a way, but it's not as elegant, right? So, what one mechanism we do have that was kind of designed for these purposes was the broadcast receiver, right? So what we can do is we can define this timeline receiver that's just going to be part of the timeline. So let's do that. I'm going to define it in timeline as an inner class, I'll say class timeline receiver extends broadcast receiver, organize imports, and add unimplemented methods. Right? Context and intent. So now that we have a something that wakes up, what would this guy do when it's woken up? Right, so we can copy paste those lines, right, where we query the database. Right. So we would update the cursor. And then what we would need to do, let me just remember what it is, adapter. Then what we need to do is we need to change the cursor that we have on the adapter. So we would need to do adapter dot swap. There's a change cursor, there's a cursor, there's a swap cursor. Hold on. Cursor. And there's a difference between the two. Let's take a look really quickly. Maybe the document there's something changed, but they're two basically different things. There's a in a simple cursor adapter, you can swap, you can change its cursor, you can swap its cursor. One just cleans up the memory differently. Swap. So swaps a cursor, returning the old cursor. Okay, we don't really care. Okay, so I guess we don't really care about returning. Change cursor. Change cursor. Change it down like, okay, so change cursor is fine. Alright, so that's the one we're gonna use. So this basically now on receive is gonna update the cursor. Right? Might as well do a little tag so we know that it's going on. Log.d tag comma. Ooh, I don't even have a log d. Okay, so that's our broadcast receiver. So as you can see, broadcast receivers are pretty straightforward. They're tiny, right? Now, how do you register this broadcast receiver? You could register it in a manifest and it would be registered forever and ever, yes. But to mix things up, to do things differently, we're going to register this guy programmatically. Okay? So to register it programmatically, we are going to need to figure out where we're going to register it programmatically. So when does it make sense to keep on receiving notifications to refresh? So while oh well, yeah, right. But if it's not running, we're just not getting any notifications to begin with, so it doesn't really matter. So when the timeline is in the foreground, yes. In other words, it's like in a running state, right? So if you remember this, we talked about this a couple of times. So we want to basically limit it to this state here, right? That's one design, right? So where do I want to turn it on? Where do I want to turn off the registration? Yeah, let me do green for on. So on resume is a good place to turn it on, right? Because all the roads go through on resume, and then on pause is a good place to turn it off, right? So what I would do is I would go here, and then after on create, I would actually I would add those two methods. So source, so override implement methods, and then I would find the on resume, and on pause I'll just flip them because they make more sense the other way around, right? So on resume is where we turn on pause is where we turn off this. So how do I register receiver? Well, there is actually a register receiver method. You need two things. You need a receiver and you need a filter. And then the counterpart of registering is going to be unregister, right? Unregister, oops. So we're like unlike a manifest file, we're constantly turning those on, off, right? So far so good. So now we're going to have to define a property for receiver. So I'll define here timeline receiver. You guys following? So now receiver doesn't exist, so we should instantiate it. I could do something like this lazily, right? If receiver is null, receiver is new timeline receiver, right? So we just lazily initialize it, yeah? When needed. By the way, just to kind of compare notes to what we're doing here, because I'm mixing it to what, we did this before, but you guys did it like this. So I just wanted to kind of like say, hey, look, there's an actual different way to do it, in programmatic way, right? And by the way, the programmatic way may be a better way sometimes. Like in this case, it is. Because we don't need this thing registered all the time. We just need it while we're looking at it, right? Otherwise, it doesn't exist. If it was registered outside of the activity being existing, it doesn't make sense, right? It can't update the list because the list is gone, etc., etc. So what we want to do here is, so what we did here is we said, let there be a receiver, new receiver with such and such name, right? And then what we had to do is we had to provide an intent filter for some action, which is a piece of text, right? So that's what's missing right now for us as well. So we just have to provide a new intent filter for some kind of text. So what we now need is just a piece of text. We could define this piece of text as a constant. I'm thinking may make sense to put it in the Yamba app, and maybe create a public static final string, and just what do you want to call that? Action new status. And we can make up something like example.yamba.new status. It's a piece of text. Right, I'd rather, I mean, I can copy paste this piece of text, but that leads to typos. So this is a little better to actually put it as a constant, right? So now that we have that constant, then here we can say our filter is actually going to look for Yamba app dot action new status. So far so good. So this is pretty much done, right? So basically what we've done is we created a new timeline receiver, we instantiate it lazily, we register it for a specific intent filter for a specific text, right? So that's equivalent of what you had going on here statically, right? So that was basically it. Just that you've never seen it like being unregistered before, right? But in this case, we have to unregister it as well. So on pause, we actually unregister this receiver by doing this line here, right? And then the receiver itself is super simple. It's basically just an inner class here, and it says on receive, get a cursor. So basically copy pasted this line, get the new data. We change the cursor that we had from before. That's it. Now, what we've done so far is this part of the equation. We said what should happen when we get notified, right? So what happens on the receive, like what we are registering for. But we haven't specified who's going to throw this notification. Where does that come from, right? So who is going to throw this notification? We could do, yeah, I mean, it could be, let's see, I mean, update service is one of them. Update service does know, it goes through, for loop. and it does do the insert, right? So it does do the insert. By the way, I may want to shut down my menu. Stop service. So we could do it here, right? In insert. I mean in this. What's that? Well, so both of them are doing the same job, right? Well, both if refresh does the same job as update. It just does it one off. Does it differently, but does it one off, right? You know, so it's the same thing. Refresh service was also doing the same job. It goes to Yam timeline and gets, does the insert into database. So we would like to know. We would like to know if this was successful or not, right? So, what's that? Insert data column. Sorry.
In the insert column, status data. Why not do that?
Status data. So let's take a look at status data. So inside of the insert there. Well,
it's closer to the action, so to speak.
Yeah, so we could do it here. That's absolutely right. We could do it here. We could send a broadcast. You got a new tweet. You got a new tweet. And the thing is, I would probably get 20 new. Like you say, I do a refresh and I got 7 new tweets. That would cause 7 broadcast intents to be fired. If I did it here, we could definitely do it here. I could send broadcast here, right? But that would work, but it would cost 7 times to say consecutive. Got new tweet, got new tweet. It'd be nicer if there was only one notification that says you got 7 tweets, right? So another option to do this is to have this guy actually. Let's see. Oops. So this guy returns along the idea of the newly created row or the primary key of the existing row if the input parameter or minus okay, primary key of existing row. No. We could do it. How would you do it?
Or just set a flag. But then you'll have to use that flag.
Right. So what's a good way? How would you address this? It's an interesting problem. So let's say in refresh service, how would we know how many new tweets we got? Insert returns account? But insert posts only one at a time. Which list?
But the list might not be accurate.
But this is defined as getting 20 most recent tweets from 20 friends in 20 last 24 hours. So we don't know how many things are going to be repeating. If I do a refresh, I'm going to actually get 20 back to back, but they're all going to be... Right. Yeah, I could do that. We could also base it on timestamp, right? Presumably that's correct, right? Right, so one way we could do this, well, we could query a database, but that sounds like a lot of work.
You could also call this in two places. So you could also take this code and put it in your status object and make that call once and have it walk through the list and keep track of how many inserts you're doing and the results that come back, and it returns the int of the number of new items added.
Okay, so you're saying refactor this code into status data.
Right. You could even avoid sending the broadcast if you know that it hasn't updated anything.
Right. Okay, so basically you're saying this code that we have here, right? You're saying that this code that we have here so for status data, right, that basically fetches the data and inserts it in the database. We are repeating that code here, and we're repeating that exact code here, right? That's two exactly the same piece of code, right? Right?
Yes.
Okay, so where would you guys put it now that you know the architecture? Would the status data or another place is maybe Yamba app?
Status data is more pertaining to the data rather than just the bigger picture of the app.
Okay, okay. So basically we could create, so in status data we could basically create a method that would simply say insert, fetch an insert or something like that, right? Pull an insert. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm gonna create another method here, public void pull and insert. Right, so it's gonna do something like that. So it's gonna fetch do we have a context here? How do we get the application from status data? We have the context. Let me see, context dot get application context. I don't know if I can get the application from here. So it may make more sense to put it inside of the Yamba app, right? So let me put this code as opposed to here.
Or have a Yamba, have a method in Yamba app that does the invocation on this in the status data. Because realistically, this pertains to data accessing to you, right? So you want to keep it coherent, right?
Yeah, so Yamba could call, well, Yamba would call status data insert, yes. Yeah, it would, yeah. Yeah, so let's do it like this. So in Yamba app, so just a little refactoring. So get whether on share preference changed. So I'll put it somewhere here. So we are basically creating a method that's gonna get Twitter, get timeline, right? And then it's going to insert into timeline. Very simple, right? Right? So pull and insert. Right? So we're just refactoring a little bit. We're just getting back to square one at this point to simplify our code a little bit. But it's interesting how you get to now touch all the stuff that we've done before, right? So pull and insert should be pretty straightforward. And once you have that, then your update service, you can cut all that stuff out, and you can just say number app something like that, pull and insert, so that gets the data. And in that case, we don't have a Twitter exception anymore, so this doesn't make sense. What's that? Yes, presumably I do, yeah. And then same here, I would basically replace all this code with that code, and actually on handling 10 becomes uber simple now. I got my refresh service back where I wanted it, like one screen, right? So, and by the way, we really don't care about the update service that much because, like I said, we're gonna obsolete it. So it's not very intelligent in the way it works. So I really care more about refresh service. So if refresh service simply now says, okay, let's go pull and insert in Yamba app, right? So we cut out a whole bunch of stuff, and then Yamba app does pull and insert, and yes, you guys are right, it could fail, so we could catch the source override insert, catch the exception. That would be the proper thing to do, and I could say here that it failed if it did. Log E. Failed to pull stat timeline. So basically I yanked all that code and replaced it with this one. So your while, pull and insert, wait 30 seconds, and then do it again. This code is very similar to refresh service, it's just that we have to manage all this threading stuff ourselves. That's why we have this, like, spaghetti. Or not spaghetti, but it's like, layered code. Stuff inside of stuff. That's why I like my refresh service much better. Which one? Oh, the updater? So this was new. Oh, that was old. That was all code. That was just parsing the blah stuff. Yeah.
People go to a refresh service.
So let me just recap what we're doing. So basically, we want to get to something like this. This guy knows when there's something new, right? It's aware of new tweets. Its job is to keep on pulling. If I am looking at my timeline, only if I'm looking at my timeline, right? I would like to get notified that there's a new tweet. Like, so if I'm staring at it, it says, oh, look, you got a new tweet. Like, the real Twitter does this pretty well. Where's my real Twitter browser? Now let me just open it up. So if I go to twitter.com and I let it like just sit there, I don't have to keep on refreshing. It's actually going to tell me, hey, you got new tweets coming in after a while. So like there's going to be a little notification here, right? So that's kind of what we would like to get to, the point that we would like to get to, right? So what I would do, what we're trying to do then, is we're trying to create a receiver, timeline receiver, that's only going to exist while the user is staring at this screen. Okay, so unlike this guy, which is statically registered to some system notification, right? Like boot completed. Okay, and it's done so in the manifest file. This guy is dynamically, programmatically registered, unregistered by us. Also, unlike this guy getting a notification from some system, we are gonna send a notification in this case and notify our guy. So it's a different use of this. Concepts and principles are the same. I'm just kind of mixing and matching, and this is a good motivation. That's why we need something like that, right? So that translates into code like this. We had basically a timeline receiver, right? Which was just a broadcast receiver. You implement on receive, blah, blah. Everything up until here is a copy-paste template. We get the data and we refresh the cursor on the adapter. That's it, right? So far, all our broadcast receivers have been 1 or 2 liners, right? Now, what was different, unlike the previous guy, which we registered like this statically, we said, let there be a boot receiver that has an intent filter for this action, right? Same thing programmatically looks like this, right? Let there be a boot receiver or timeline receiver. Let's instantiate it. Let's register it for this action. And the action is some piece of text that we defined in Yamba app. It doesn't matter what it is. It's usually some constant. It's a piece of text. You got mail, right? Something like that. So that's what we did. So we did 1/2 of that. We now got this guy done, right? Now we were like, all right, well, who's gonna notify it? Where's this gonna come from, right? We're like, okay, well, we have a service, but in this diagram we only had the updater service, right? And you guys are overachievers, so we actually have in this course 2 services: refresh service and the update service, right? So now we noticed, oh shoot, I got 2 pieces of code and it looks hella familiar, right? So as opposed to copy pasting from one to another and maintaining these 2 copies of code, we said, let's do a little refactoring. So I totally get that whenever you do a refactoring, it gets confusing, right? Because I'm moving around and copying code. So that's why I'm walking you through it again. So we observed that update service was doing a bunch of stuff here, pulling data from Twitter and then going through a for each loop and then inserting it into a database, right? Then refresh service was doing the same thing. We're like, how about we take that stuff and cut it out and put it somewhere else? So we figured, all right, let's create this was the stuff that they did before. This is a copy-pasted code, right? Or cut-pasted code, right? Get the public timeline, loop through all the timeline, and insert it to database, right? Old stuff. So we just pulled it into this place, called it pull and insert, right? And then just refer to it here. It's just basic refactoring. I didn't really do anything new. Just moved code around and adjusted references, right? Just plain old Java refactoring. I'm sure there's a button in Eclipse for that somewhere, right? So I just don't know it that well. So is everyone now on the same page? You guys get it? It wasn't really that much typing. Yes, it was a little bit of a cut pasting, but that was just the nature of refactoring. And you know, trust me, I know it's much easier to do than to watch in this case. And it's even harder to explain it in a book. So like to explain how in words on a paper, it's like, whew. But I do this a couple of times just because it's kind of necessary and it's like nice to do, right? So at this point, we have a placeholder in status in Yamba app where we do pull and insert. So this guy is both getting tweets and attempting to insert them. Now the question is, how do we train this guy to actually know to actually know if there's a new tweet, right? Well, I mean, we could do it. There are different ways we could do it. You know, insert presumably could return a boolean if it was successful or not. It returns an ID. We could basically do it based on ID. We could also do it based on timestamp, right? So do you guys, it doesn't really matter. Let's assume the timestamp is correct because it comes from the single cloud. So why wouldn't it be? And it's well defined. It's in, you know, GMT, blah blah blah, milliseconds and stuff. So I could have a variable something like this: long last timestamp seen is -1 or something like that. Right? And then what we can do here when we are inserting, right? For each status, we can say if status dot created at dot get time is greater than last time stamp seen, right? Then that means we got a new tweet. Make sense? Or new status, right? So what we could do in that case is we could introduce some kind of counter, right? I could have an int counter, and our count is gonna be 0. So we start with 0, right? And so if we do have a new timestamp, we can just do count plus plus, right? And then we should also set the last timestamp seen. It becomes that status blah blah get time, right? So far so good. So this is our little logic that's gonna presumably determine this, right? If it works. So and at the end, like even before we get into intents and all that, even if I just simply wanted to return the number of that, I could change this to int, and then I could at the end say return count, right? So that would return how many counts we got. So if we didn't want to do the what happened, we could pass this on to somebody else, whoever the caller is, and make them responsible, right? But we could also do a notification here. So if we wanted to notify the user, then we can basically say, all right, it makes sense only to send the broadcast if the count is greater than 0. Otherwise, don't do this, right? So if we actually have new tweets, let's send a broadcast. Right? Send broadcast. Okay? And we can basically do a new intent for action. Where's the action? Where's the action? String action, new status. New intent, bam. Make sense? So now this is what you haven't seen before, because before we were depending on the system submitted stuff, right? We were waiting for system to send broadcasts, etc. In this case, what we're doing is we're sending the broadcasts ourselves, right? So what have you seen so far with intents? What can you really do with intents? So you can start an activity, right? So anyone can say start an activity for an intent. It could be a service launching an activity. It doesn't have to be just an activity starting an activity, right? It could be application starting an activity. But you're right, you can start an activity. You can start and stop a service. We saw that. Now you're seeing send a broadcast, right? There's maybe only one other one that you can do, and that's bind to a service, which we'll do later, right? That's the AIDL stuff, bound services, blah, 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 that I've been kind of like leaving for later, right? So that's what you can do with intents. And on the flip side of things, you can filter for intents by using intent filters. And you've seen intent filters both static, right, which was this kind of stuff here, intent filter, etc., etc. But you've also seen them used dynamically. In this case, where we said new intent filter, blah, some message, i.e. action name, yada yada, right? So this stuff is kind of similar, right? It's the same stuff. It's just in Java may look totally different than in XML, but conceptually it's the same stuff, right?
Can you explain why it's in on resume and not in on create broadcast?
Why is this on in on resume rather than on create? So if you remember the life cycle of the activity, I made a business choice to only listen to updates, to keep refreshing my screen while the user is on watching this activity. I do not want to do it while the activity is stopped. You could have spread the net wider, it's up to you, right? If I wanted to keep refreshing the screen even while the activity is stopped, I could have done that. And then my entry point would be on create, my exit point would be like on destroy or something like that, right? Yeah, but usually when you want, it's pretty common to do things, especially expensive things, just while in this state, and that's why the common entry point is resume, because it's a common entry to that state, and exit point is usually that one, right?
That's your own positive.
Just unregister, opposite of register, yeah, unregistered receiver. And you know what? Maybe I'll just put this here. Kind of like, I know I'm breaking somebody's rules somewhere, but I don't care. So this is kind of like self-contained, right? Make sense? So another thing that we can do that's kind of cool is we haven't test driven this yet, but another thing that we can easily do is we can actually attach a small amount of data to an intent, right? So the way I kind of think of an intent is that intent is sort of like your URL get, right? So it's kind of like a URL, right? It's a piece of text, and you can attach some amount of data, like primitive data. Just like if I go to, I don't know, Amazon.com, I can say, product $ID equals 47, right? Make sense? Mm-hmm. So to do something like that, maybe I want to put that count in. So to do that, I can do dot put not integer arrays. So let's see, put extra, and I'm gonna put the name. The name is gonna be count, and the value is gonna be count. Right? So just a name value pair. And this works for primitive data. This is sort of equivalent of saying $ID equals count. Whatever that count is. Yeah, I'm sending this count information to the world, and those who care are gonna receive it. So now our receiver, just to kind of...
So you have to know the character count, right? In order to...
Yeah, you need to know. Yeah, you need to know what to extract. Yeah. So presumably this is for communicating. It's not for like randomly looking up stuff, but it's more like, I know my receiver. My receiver is right here. So I can now, on the flip side of the thing, I can actually extract that, because that intent that woke up this receiver is right here, right? So if I just want it just for fun, I can say with count, right? And I can say plus, and I could do something like this: intent dot get int extra, right? The name would be count, and the default value would be 0 or minus, yeah, I guess 0, right? So this would actually print out the. Make sense? So let me fire it up and see if it works. See, that's what I was saying. See how now it knows that I got 8 new tweets, right? You know, Twitter itself, yeah? It's kind of a nice little feature. Okay, so let's see. I'm interested in what's going on here. ADB logcat, right? So let's see. So this is pretty stale information, right? So if I click on menu update, refresh, right? If everything is correct, come on. If everything is correct, then this should go fetch the data, and it should actually update my list. So did fetch the data, and did it update the list? Well, we did get a notification cursor change with count 1. Did I really just have 1 new tweet? Is that possible? Let's see. Oh, it's yeah. So it did update my data. But I don't know if my count is right. I'll try it again, right? So I did see the latest one is 0 minutes, right? So that tells you that it did update it, right? So now but it should be, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I should have gotten like, I think, 5 different counts. The question is, why is this count 1? Let me do a tiny little change in my how I log, because I don't care about not this one, but this one. This logging, I'm actually going to move it 1 line in so that I only print out the new stuff. Right? So let's see. I'm going to go tweet a bunch of stuff. Login. Hello. Hello. Okay, so now if I go and do redeploy this,
The issue is the first time your first status was created, last updated time was created. You have second one.
If it's sorted from latest timestamp to lowest, when you do get public timeline, your first one's going to be the highest timestamp.
oh, I see, because of the order that we have, right?
Right.
So that's not going to work. Okay, so what we can do is not initialize the last timestamp seen here, right? But initialize it later, right? Let me see.
Basically, do the
Like this, and then basically do it here, something like this. This dot, this, something like that. And so I'm comparing them to this, right? Let's see. Should probably come up with that better names, but let's try. Yeah, I forgot that we're sorting it in reverse order. So, okay. So 4 minutes ago. So if I do menu, refresh. Did it really see 20 new ones? Questionable. Well, but so let's say 1, 2, 3. I need at least 2 to test this. 3, 4, 5, 6. You guys now understand why we're not working with real Twitter, right? So if I now do wash this and do menu refresh. No, that didn't is. My logic is busted. Yeah. This is working though, but we're not seeing the duplicates or anything like that. But we're not getting the right count. So let me think about that for a second. Let's test. It's quicker to test than to think about it. Whoa. Okay, my amulet will blow up. Well, that's the problem. It's a descending order. So I was assuming that.
It'll be the first one, right? The latest one is the one that you want to check.
Yeah, we could do that. Then we are depending on the fact that yeah, the service returns it the right order. Let me just start this. We could do that. So it's supposed to do logic, which would also be independent of that. You're basically saying something like this: if biggest is -1, then biggest becomes the currents. This one, right? Because we're assuming. So that's one approach. Yeah. But the other approach would be to basically actually do this thing here, to be not to be dependent on it. So basically, I'm saying if status is greater than the biggest, then assign the status. Otherwise, use the biggest. Right. Either one will work. So I believe. But let me comment this out, and we'll see when the emulator actually restarts what happens. But it's gonna say 20 first time. Yeah. So okay, that restarted rather quickly. But do you guys get the idea how we're passing the data across the intent right? Okay. So menu. Refresh. 20. 2, 3, 4. Menu refresh. 2. Yeah, so it works second time. It doesn't work first time around. So we just gotta fix that. I'll think about it. I mean, that's beside the point. Does this in general make sense? The point was more about the intents, how we're doing this communication between. First of all, there were 2 points to this, right, that we just did. One point was how we created this timeline receiver in a different way to be a built-in part of the timeline activity. How we use it to refresh the adapter, to swap the cursor on the adapter, and how we used it to send a broadcast ourselves as opposed to what we did here via system broadcast, right? So far so good on this? Make sense? Okay. Do you guys want to do a short break now?